I want to be upfront about something before I tell you this. I've been a sheriff's deputy in rural Central Oregon for going on 19 years. I've worked fatal accidents. I've worked homicides. I worked a scene once where a man shot his entire family and then called us himself. I'm telling you that so you understand I don't rattle easy. What happened on Dunmore Road in the fall of 2019 rattled me. It was a Tuesday night, mid-October, around 11:40 p.m. Dispatch sent me out on a welfare check. The call had come from a woman named Carolyn Marsh, who said she'd been trying to reach her elderly father, Harold, for 3 days. No answer at the door when she'd stopped by Sunday afternoon, no answer on the phone. She lived about 2 hours north in Portland. Couldn't get back down until the weekend, and she was worried. Harold was 79, lived alone, had a history of minor heart issues. That's the whole picture. Straightforward welfare check. Harold's property was about 11 miles outside of town on Dunmore Road, a 2-lane county road that cuts through timberland. Mostly dark, no street lights, no neighbors close enough to see. His driveway was a 1/4-mile gravel stretch that ran through a tree line and opened up to a cleared lot with a single-story ranch house and a detached garage. I'd been out there once before, maybe 4 years prior, for a noise complaint that turned out to be nothing. I remembered the property as tidy, well-kept, a good lot. I turned off Dunmore onto the gravel drive and my headlights swept across the tree line. Nothing unusual. As I came around the bend and the house came into view, the porch light was on. Yellow bulb, the kind that doesn't attract bugs. That struck me as a small good sign. People who've collapsed alone inside don't usually have their porch lights on. It suggested routine, like Harold had turned it on at dusk the way he probably always did. I parked in front of the house, ran the plates on his truck in the driveway. It came back, registered to him, no flags, and got out. Quiet night. No wind. You could hear the tree frogs, but that was it. I went up the 2 porch steps and knocked. Announced myself. Nothing. Knocked again, louder, called out his name. Nothing. I tried the door. Locked. Moved around to the side of the house, looked in through a window into what looked like the living room. A lamp was on inside. Recliner, TV off, coffee table. No Harold. Around back there was a sliding glass door that faced out to a small concrete patio and a yard that dissolved into darkness at the tree line about 40 feet out. I shone my flashlight through the glass into what was the kitchen. Clean. Nothing out of place. No dishes in the sink, no food left out. I'll be honest, at this point I wasn't worried about foul play. I was thinking hospital. Maybe he'd had a cardiac event, a neighbor or passerby had called an ambulance, and Carolyn just didn't know yet. It happens more than you'd think, especially with older folks who live alone. I was already planning to call the county hospital on my way back to the cruiser. Then I heard something. It was coming from the detached garage. Not loud, not like a bang or a crash. More like a low, rhythmic sound. Steady. I stood completely still and listened. It was, and I've turned this over in my mind probably 1,000 times since. It sounded like someone slowly dragging something across a concrete floor. A long drag, then a pause, then another long drag. I unholstered and crossed the yard to the garage. Standard 2-car garage, the big roll-up door facing the driveway, and a regular entry door on the side facing the house. I went to the side door, tried it, unlocked. I pulled it open, announced myself, "Sheriff's office, anyone in here?" and swung my flashlight in. Empty. Harold's riding mower. A workbench with tools organized on pegboard. A chest freezer along the back wall. 2 old tires leaning against the side. Nothing on the floor, nothing that could have made that sound. But the sound had stopped the exact moment I opened the door. I walked the garage slowly, checked behind the mower, checked the side of the chest freezer, checked underneath the workbench. Nothing. I stood there for a moment in the silence, and then, because I'm trained to be thorough, I opened the chest freezer. It was full of meat, wrapped in white butcher paper, labeled in black marker. Deer, mostly. Harold hunted, which was common out here. Everything looked normal. I let the lid down. I was about to leave the garage when I noticed something that stopped me cold. There were marks on the concrete floor. Scuff marks, wide, dull streaks, like something heavy had been dragged. They ran from somewhere near the center of the garage floor toward the back wall. Not fresh, not like dust trails. More like old rubber or something had been pulled repeatedly across the same path over a long time. The thing is, I hadn't noticed them when I first walked in. My light had been sweeping the room generally, but when I went to leave and my flashlight hit the floor at a lower angle, they were suddenly very visible. I followed them to the back wall. They seemed to end at the base of the wall, right where the chest freezer was sitting. I stood there, moved the flashlight along the wall. Just cinder block painted white, same as the rest. No door, no hatch, nothing. The freezer sat flush against the wall. I looked at the floor again. The marks definitely went up to and underneath the freezer. I told myself it was nothing. Told myself he'd probably had a different freezer there before and moved this one into the same spot. Perfectly reasonable explanation. I called the hospital on my way back to the cruiser. Harold Marsh had not been admitted. I called the 2 closest urgent care facilities. Not there either. I called Carolyn to let her know I'd been unable to make contact and that I'd flag it for follow-up. She sounded scared. I told her I'd have someone check again in the morning. Harold turned up 2 days later. He'd driven himself to stay with a cousin in southern Idaho without telling anyone, had forgotten his phone charger, and had just been out of contact. He was fine, completely fine. Embarrassed that everyone had been worried. I drove out to meet him when he got back, just to close the loop on the welfare check. He was a nice old man. Showed me around the property, apologized for the trouble. I walked into the garage with him and I asked, casual as I could, what those scuffed marks on the floor were from. He looked at the floor for a long moment. He said he didn't know what I was talking about. I pointed to the marks still there running to the back wall. He said he'd never noticed them before. Then he said something that I've never been able to fully shake. He said that he sometimes heard sounds in the garage at night. He'd assumed it was animals. Raccoons getting into something, maybe. He hadn't thought much of it. He didn't seem frightened when he said it. He said it the way you say I keep meaning to fix that gutter, like a small, forgettable thing. I didn't tell him what I'd heard that night. I don't know why. I just didn't. I drove back to town and wrote up the welfare check as closed, no incident. That's how it's filed. No incident. But I looked up Harold's property history a few months later, out of curiosity more than anything. The land had changed hands a few times. Nothing remarkable. Before Harold bought it in 1987, it had belonged to a man named Dale Cutter, who'd sold it and moved out of the county. I ran Dale Cutter's name just to see. He died in 1994. He'd been found in a storage unit he rented outside of Bend, about 60 miles from the Dunmore Road property. The cause of death was listed as undetermined. He'd apparently been there for some time before anyone found him. I don't know what any of that means. I'm not saying those things are connected. I'm saying I found that and I closed my browser and I didn't look any further. And I haven't driven down Dunmore Road at night since. Not once. I take the long way around without thinking about it now. It's just what I do. I spent 6 years as a 911 dispatcher for a mid-sized county in northern Minnesota, lake country, resort towns, a lot of wilderness. I want to be specific about that setting because it matters. When people call from lake cabins or rural properties up there, their addresses are often vague. You're trying to GPS locate a signal off a tower that might be 8 miles away. The caller is panicking and saying things like we're at the end of the 3rd road past the boat landing. And meanwhile, you're trying to keep them calm and get responders moving in the right direction. The geography creates problems that a city dispatcher never has to deal with. I want you to understand that before I tell you what happened on the night of August 14th, because some people hear this story and they think I made an error. I didn't make an error. It was a Thursday around 2 a.m. Summer was peak season up there. Lots of people at lakeside cabins, a lot more call volume than winter. I was midway through a 12-hour overnight shift. A call came in, male voice, adult, calm but clearly shaken. Not the screaming, frantic type of emergency, more like someone working very hard to hold it together. He said, "There's a girl in the water at Echo Lake. She's been in there a long time. I don't know if she's alive." I asked him for his location. He gave me a road name and said he was at the public boat landing. He said he'd been driving past, saw something in the water from the road, pulled over. I asked him to describe what he was seeing. He said there was a figure floating face down about 15 or 20 feet from the dock. Dark clothing. He thought it was a child based on the size, or maybe a small woman. I had fire and Inez dispatched immediately, and I stayed on the line with him. He told me his name was Richard, that he was up from Rochester visiting friends, that he'd been driving back to the cabin after getting ice from a gas station in town. He sounded completely ordinary, completely believable. I asked him if the figure was moving. He said no. He said it had not moved at all since he'd stopped. I asked if he could get to her, if he could get in the water. He said the dock was there, but the water was dark and he didn't know how deep. He sounded frightened to go in. I told him that was okay, that help was coming, that he should stay on the line and stay where he was. Responders were en route. Fire station was about 9 minutes out. Here's where it started. About 2 minutes into the call, I asked Richard what color the figure's clothing was, just trying to build a picture for the responders. He said dark blue, maybe navy, like a jacket or a sweatshirt. I noted that. Then, maybe 90 seconds later, he said something that made me pause. He said, "She moved. She's turning." His voice dropped when he said it. That particular register, quiet, involuntary, that's what you hear when someone is genuinely scared, not performing it. I asked him to describe what he was seeing. He said the figure had rotated, was now face up. He paused for a long moment. I asked what he saw. He said, "She's looking at me." I asked him if she was conscious, if she was alive. He said he thought so. He said her eyes were open. He said she was very still, just floating, but her eyes were open, and she was looking directly at him on the dock. I told him to call out to her, to ask if she could hear him. He did. I heard him call out, his voice trembling, "Can you hear me? Help is coming." He came back on the line and said she hadn't responded, hadn't moved, just kept looking at him. At this point, I was tracking the responders on my screen, fire and EMS about 4 minutes out. Then Richard said, "She's gone." I asked him what he meant. He said she had just sunk. He said she didn't go under with any movement. She just went straight down like something pulled her from below. He said the water barely moved when it happened. No splash, no ripple, just gone. I told him to stay where he was, that the fire truck was almost there. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, and I remember this word for word because I wrote it in my incident notes before I even thought about it. He said, "This isn't the first time something's happened at this lake at night. People around here know that." I asked him what he meant. He didn't answer. I asked again. He said, "I shouldn't have said anything. Forget I said that." Fire arrived at the boat landing 4 minutes and 20 seconds after that exchange. The firefighters found Richard standing at the end of the dock, phone still in hand. They searched the water with spotlights and a thermal camera. Nothing. They deployed a rescue swimmer. Nothing. Water depth at that location was about 18 feet. They searched for 40 minutes. No body was ever found. No missing persons report matched a child or small woman in dark blue clothing. The report was filed as unfounded, no victim located. Here's what I can't explain. 3 weeks later, I was reviewing old call logs for a completely unrelated incident, a noise complaint that had come in around the same time that night. Standard administrative stuff. I was cross-referencing call times. I found a duplicate entry in the system for that same night, same time window. Echo Lake. It was a second call. Different caller ID, logged at 2:06 a.m., 4 minutes after Richard's call came in. It had been flagged as an abandoned call, which happens sometimes. Someone dials, thinks better of it, hangs up before anyone picks up. We get those constantly. They're logged and closed unless there's a reason for concern. This call had lasted 11 seconds before the caller hung up, but because it had been flagged as abandoned rather than answered, no one had reviewed the audio. I pulled the audio. For the first 9 seconds, there's nothing but silence and what sounds like water. Background noise, moving water, like you're near a lake. Then, for approximately 2 seconds at the very end of the recording, before the call disconnects, there is a voice. It's a child's voice or something close to it. It says one word. It says hello. That's it. Then the call ends. I don't know who made that call. The number it came from was a landline registered to a summer cabin on Echo Lake Road. I looked up the address. The cabin had been vacant all that summer. The owners hadn't come up that year. Their rental listing had been taken down in June. Nobody had been in that cabin. I transferred to a different county dispatch center 8 months after that. I told my supervisor it was for the shorter commute. That was part of it. I still have the audio clip. I've never shared it with anyone. I don't know why I saved it. I don't know why I keep it. I just do.